Good morning. It is Monday, October the 29th, and this is The Drill. Thank you. And this is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. So there's two takeaways from the Dodgers' loss last night. Number one takeaway is that the Dodgers think that they're playing slow pitch softball. The Dodgers will either hit a home run, strike out, or walk, by and large. If they do get a base hit or a double, it's simply because they mishit the ball. Every Dodger that comes to the plate, including the pitcher, is swinging for the fence. Everybody thinks that they're Babe Ruth or Hank Aaron. They're not. And if you looked at the Red Sox, you noticed that what was more effective, and that is playing a variety. You hit the home runs when you can, but in certain situations, it's best to play small ball. The Dodgers were up, not last night, but the night before, 4-0 on a 3-run Yasiel Puig home run. and the Reds came right back. And they did it with singles. Hit a single here, hit a single there, hit a double over there, and the next thing you know, they've got a few runs in, and the next thing you know, it's 4-3. And then after that, it's, again, the Dodgers end up losing because they can't come back because all they know how to do is hit home runs. So I would suggest that the Dodgers still want to think that they're playing slow pitch softball, that they should probably drink a lot of beer and grow themselves a nice beer gut. And then at least they'll look the part. Second takeaway is that Kershaw is through. Kershaw's done. He's not a starter. He's not he's not a starting pitcher. He may be very good out of the bullpen, but either put him in the bullpen, trade him, sell him, whatever. But $217 million for what we're getting out of him now is ridiculous. I think there's $68 million left on his contract. Forget it. He was a great pitcher before he hurt his back. Then he had surgery, and there's a long rehabilitation. He came back, and he seemed to be as good as new. Then he had started having muscle spasms in his back, and he was out for about 3 to 4 months. He's never been the same since. He seems to have lost a lot of confidence. I imagine that he is on the mound spending a lot more time thinking about his back than he is thinking about the batters, because he's clearly not the same pitcher he used to be. So, when we come back, it is going to be concept time and the Ayn Rand lexicon. Okay, so welcome back. And the Ayn Rand lexicon, chock full of great concepts, and concepts are really patterns. That's basically when you are conceptualizing, you are conducting pattern recognition. You recognize patterns and you consolidate them, for lack of a better term. So, but anyways, this is going to be part 2 of the concept from the Ayn Rand lexicon. A concept is a mental integration of 2 or more units possessing the same distinguishing characteristics with their particular measurements omitted. The basic principle of concept formation, which states that the omitted measurements must exist in some quantity but may exist in any quantity, is the equivalent of the basic principle of algebra, which states that algebraic symbols must be given some numerical value, but they may be given any value. In this sense and respect, perceptual awareness is the arithmetic, but conceptual awareness is the algebra of cognition. None of the traditional theories of concepts regards concepts as objective, i.e., as neither revealed nor invented, but as produced by man's consciousness in accordance with the facts of reality, as mental integrations of factual data computed by man, as the products of a cognitive method of classification whose processes must be performed by man, but whose content is dictated by reality. Concepts represent condensations of knowledge, which make further study and the division of cognitive labor possible. Conceptualization is a method of expanding man's consciousness by reducing the number of its contents units, a systematic means to an unlimited integration of cognitive data. It is crucially important to grasp the fact that a concept is an open-end classification, which includes the yet-to-be-discovered characteristics of a group of existence. All of man's knowledge rests on that fact. Concepts, and therefore language, are primarily a tool of cognition, not of communication, as is usually assumed. Communication is merely the consequence, not the cause nor the primary purpose. Just a second. There we go. Let's try that again. Concepts, and therefore language, are primarily a tool of cognition, not of communication, as is usually assumed. Communication is merely the consequence, not the cause nor the primary purpose of concept formation. A crucial consequence of invaluable importance to men, but still only a consequence. Cognition precedes communication. The necessary precondition of communication is that one have something to communicate. The primary purpose of concepts and of language is to provide man with a system of cognitive classification and organization, which enables him to acquire knowledge on an unlimited scale. This means to keep order in man's mind and enable him to think. Abstract ideas are conceptual integrations which subsume an incalculable number of concretes, and without abstract ideas, you would not be able to deal with concrete, particular real-life problems. You would be in the position of a newborn infant to whom every object is unique and unprecedented phenomenon. The difference between his mental state and yours lies in the number of conceptual integrations your mind has performed. Conceptual awareness is the only type of awareness capable of integrating the criterion of what is good. Aesthetic abstractions are formed by the criterion of what is important. And that concludes the concept from the Ayn Rand lexicon. And when I come back, I'm going to be reading from the 10 Books That Screwed Up the World, and we're dealing with an absolutely excellent book called Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes. Okay, and welcome back. So, Chapter 3 of the book, The 10 Books That Screwed Up the World and 5 That Didn't Help, by Benjamin Wiker, is called Leviathan. It was written in 1651 by Thomas Hobbes, who lived from 1588 to 1679. According to Thomas Hobbes, there is by nature no good and evil, right and wrong, just and unjust. Left to ourselves, independent of society, and in our natural condition, we are creatures entirely without conscience, ruled solely by pleasure and pain, ravenous in our desires, and ruthless in their pursuit. If that redefinition of human nature weren't bad enough, Hobbes added the insidious notion that human rights are simply equivalent to human desires, however sordid, so that whatever we happen to desire, we have a right to by nature. Thus, Hobbes is the father of the all-too-familiar belief that we have a right to whatever we want, however morally degraded, vile, or trivial it may be, and further, that it is the government's job to protect such rights. It is not surprising that Hobbes' negative and ignoble view of human nature and human society yields a negative and ignoble view of justice. It is doubly unsurprising that his view consequently produces a notion of government drained of all but the lowest motives. A Hobbesian society is one in which each person considers himself first and foremost as an individual brimming with rights/desires, but with no fundamental responsibility to anyone else. For the Hobbesian individual, then, it is the entire job of government to protect and maximize the expression of these individual rights/desires while simultaneously minimizing conflict with other rights/desires bearing individuals. In short, the one and only task of government is merely to reproduce a happier version of the Hobbesian state of nature, where there is a maximum of liberty to pursue one's personal desires, but without the nasty, violent death part. Hobbesian justice is therefore understood as a kind of inversion of the golden rule. Don't do unto others so they don't do unto you. Or, if we could put it in a longer positive form that is more familiar, let others do what they want, as long as whatever they want to do is not directly hurting you, so that you may do whatever you want, as long as you are not directly hurting others. The underlying assumption of this view of justice, we recall, is the Hobbesian belief that there is by nature no good and evil, that the words good and evil mean only, that feels good to me, and ouch, I don't like that, respectively. The result is that morality becomes merely a private thing, a thing of personal taste, so that I think abortion is wrong, or I think pornography is wrong, are no more or less moral statements than I don't like chocolate ice cream, or I can't abide chartreuse. This complete moral relativism is behind the great Hobbesian protest of our time. No one has the right to tell me what to do. Note the emphasis on right, as in Hobbesian rights/desires, not on right, as in right and wrong. The interesting thing about Hobbesianism, if you tend to be interested in the macabre, is that it becomes a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. That is, although his chaotic state of nature was originally an unseemly fiction, if a society acts according to Hobbes's notion of rights, then it becomes increasingly a fractious, rights-demanding, passion-driven collection of self-willed individuals hell-bent on getting whatever they desire, no matter the cost, and all the while claiming they have a right to what leads to their own and society's self-destruction. Perhaps that is why you might have a feeling of déjà vu when you read Hobbes's Leviathan. So, I kind of shortened that up. It's much longer chapter than what I included there, but I think that those sections make the point of, you hear it every day these days on the news, on the radio, television. I have the right for this. I have the right to this. You're to that. You can't. I have the right to be heard. I have the right to speak. I have the right to anything and everything. And when rights become merely an expression of will or expression of desires, but not a concept, then, as Mr. Wiker has described, you end up with a society that goes into a downward spiral and starts to unravel, or a civilization that basically becomes increasingly uncivilized. So we'll be back in a minute. Okay, welcome back. And so I'm going to be finishing up the Bill O'Reilly Playboy interview. Playboy, have you tried drugs? O'Reilly, never. I've never smoked a marijuana cigarette, never been drunk. Playboy, weren't you curious? O'Reilly, no, because I always saw what they did to people around me. I was constantly having to take them to the hospital. They were always throwing up. Girls were sleeping with guys, and the next day they were sobbing. Intoxication held no attraction for me. I was lucky because there's a lot of alcoholism in my family. Playboy, do you use alcohol socially? O'Reilly, no. My mandate is to be totally sober every second so I can see and hear what's going on. I don't do anything that detaches my senses from the here and now. As a journalist, it's a tremendous advantage. Playboy, Fox News anchor Britt Hume told Playboy that Fox is fair and balanced, echoing the network's slogan. But do you admit that there's a point of view that is most often conservative? O'Reilly, the main thing Roger Ailes created is a network that gives people voices you won't hear on the other networks. That said, the news portion of Fox, which runs from 9 until 5, is unbiased. Once the news analysis programs kick in, the dominant personalities are conservative. Sean Hannity is a knee-jerk right-winger. Hume isn't, though he certainly is conservative. I come in and try to give balance. You don't know what I'm going to say. No matter what you hear about me, I'm the guy who's fair. Everybody gets treated the same. Everybody gets asked the hard questions, whether Republican, Democrat, Clooney, or Ashcroft. Nobody escapes. Do something stupid, no matter who you are, and I'll call it stupid. Do something noble, and I will recognize that too. As long as politicians and other public figures keep doing stupid things, I'll be in business. How long will politicians keep doing stupid things? I think I'll be around a while. Let's put it that way. So, and that's the conclusion of the interview by Playboy with Bill O'Reilly. So the only thing I was thinking about when I was reading that was how Bill O'Reilly went out. He got certain accusations against him that he was sexually harassing people and whatnot. And he went ahead and resigned. He says, well, it was a business decision. Me and Fox sat down and we figured the best thing to do was to go ahead and part company. So he resigns. Problem with resigning is that it's tantamount to a confession. And once you confessed, you're screwed. Okay, very, very, very difficult to rehabilitate your image once you've confessed. It's almost impossible. If you are convicted, if he'd gone to trial or something and he was convicted, he can always claim he didn't get a fair break on the trial, the jury was biased, tampered with, whatever. He could always come up with something, some basis on which to, again, rehabilitate his image. Or, very possibly, just go ahead and say, I'm going to accept the jury's verdict and I apologize and I'm going to do what I can to make amends. But do it then. Whereas if you confess, then because you never know in a trial, you might be exonerated. Some sort of a trial, he might end up being exonerated. So, but when you confess, you close that opportunity out, and you confess when you resign. When Richard Nixon resigned from office, it was tantamount to a confession. Yes, I did all these things. I was involved in and knew about the break-in. I knew about the efforts to cover it up, and there you go. If he had said, no, you know what, go ahead and impeach me, put me on trial, and we'll go from there. But he was allowed to be talked into resigning. He resigned, and ever after that, that sealed his fate. That sealed his public image. Richard Nixon will always, forever be known as Tricky Dick. That was the way he was called then, and he'll be forever known that way, simply because he resigned. And so it's interesting that in the end, Richard Nixon's biggest enemy was Richard Nixon. He had an enemies list, and it really turned out that his biggest enemy was him. So, and it also underscores what I've said about power, and that power, the number one rule of power is use the power you have. And he had the power at that point to decide whether or not to resign. All he had to do was say, no, I'm not going to resign. For the good of the party or otherwise, I'm not resigning. So you do what you've got to do. Have a nice day. And he failed to do that and paid the price for it for the rest of his life, and perhaps for all eternity. So that's what that all. And anyways, getting it back to Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly basically did the same thing. He says, okay, I'm not admitting guilt. Bull. Once you resign from your show, you're admitting guilt, whether you like it or not. That's the appearance you're giving off of, that you're trying to get out from underneath all of this pressure. And why would you do it? Because otherwise, if you were innocent, why wouldn't you fight? Why wouldn't you go ahead and put it on trial? Now, the most interesting thing about this with Bill O'Reilly is that he came to regret it. He's back on the air, so to speak. He's not on Fox anymore. I know that he has. I've seen and heard him on YouTube several times, but he's not on Fox. But he's made a comeback, and in part because the same kind of thing was happening to Sean Hannity. People were on him and making various types of allegations about Sean Hannity. I don't think it ran to sexual harassment, but it was other things. And Sean, instead of quitting, Sean stood his ground, said, forget it. There was a lot of talk about what they're trying to do is get rid of Sean's sponsors, threaten the sponsors, and get the sponsors to withdraw. And without the sponsors, then Sean would be without a show, basically. And Sean stood tough and survived. Because you got to remember with the left that they're always bluffing. Okay? When in doubt, call their bluff. And the simple way to call their bluff is just a lot of times by saying no. By saying, I refuse to be intimidated. There you go. Then the rest of it's on them. They'll make all kinds of veiled and vague threats and call their bluff. Make them prove it. Put up or shut up, I think is the way to do it. So after that, after O'Reilly saw what happened with Sean Hannity, he saw the possibility that you can stand your ground and defeat liberals just simply by standing your ground, then he realized he'd made a huge mistake. Again, a lot too little too late for Bill O'Reilly, but a lesson for the rest of us. Okay, is, don't allow yourself to be intimidated by the left, and remember that the left is always bluffing. So, at this point, I'll call it a day, and this will be the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.